Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
All right. Did you ever read Archie comic books, Jack? I didn't. Well, I saw the show. Anyway, hello, and welcome to the GSMC television podcast. We're part of the mighty GSMC podcast network, and I'm your hot and humid host, Howard Fletcher. I am joined, as always, by my side, my trusted engineer, Jack the Black Pug. We are positively honored and thrilled to be here with you once again. If you're new to the show, I'd like to give you a very warm welcome. Thank you for giving us a try. There is a whole lot of podcasts and videos and shows and movies and all kinds of stuff you can do with your time rather than have me blathering in your ear. So we appreciate you choosing to spend some time with us. We aim to please. Stick around. I'm sure you'll hear something that you like. We want to keep you coming back. That's the plan. And if you're one of our loyal return listeners, you know how we feel about you. You are truly the reason that I am here, the reason that Jack is here. So let's have some fun. We have another jam-packed show for you today. The Screen Actors Guild, SAG. Well, they have a beef with Michael Bay. I'm going to tell you about that. The studios keep delaying movie releases. We've talked about that almost every show for the past 4 or 5 weeks, and we're still talking about it. And what does this mean for streaming? More shows are getting 86th. I'm going to tell you what shows I have on the list and tell you what shows maybe I think will end up on that list. Most of them have been cut for the most part from last season, but a few more have been added. And I will always bring you breaking news as it comes. You know that. And because Starz decided not to air the finale of Hightown during the July 4th weekend, I won't be recapping it. And I know you're very disappointed about that. But instead, I'm going to give you my review of Season 3 of Marcella on Netflix. It'll be a good one. But first, here is some breaking news about Riverdale, kinda, but it has to do with the CW. Katie Keene, a show that I have never mentioned on this podcast. The only reason I'm mentioning it now is because it will not be coming back for more adventures in the world of New York fashion, at least not at the CW. The network has canceled the Riverdale spinoff after a single season. According to the sources, the show's producer, Warner Brothers, intends to explore possibilities to keep it going on another platform. Now, I imagine they're going to try to pitch it to Netflix or Hulu or someone like that, maybe, or Quibi. They may pick it up, somebody like that, but not going to be on the CW. Katie Keene, now it's based on the Archie comics character, and it follows an aspiring fashion designer named, guess what, Katie Keene, played by Lucy Hale, who meets Josie McCoy, played by Ashley Murray, fresh off the bus to chase her musical dreams. Their world is populated with kindred spirit, starved artists, including mysterious socialite Pepper Smith, played by Julia Chan, and Broadway-bound performer Jorge Lopez, and his drag queen alter ego, Ginger. Wow. The series was the only CW show not to be renewed in January. Let me repeat that. This series was the only CW show not to be renewed in January, when the network handed out second season pickups to fellow newcomers Batwoman and Nancy Drew. Now, it's worth noting that even though Batwoman will swing into action for another season, as we reported here, it will be without lead actor Ruby Rose, who exited in May. Sources attributed her departure to being unhappy with the long hours required of her as the lead, which led to friction on the set. The Katie Keene cancellation isn't that surprising, given that it failed to take off viewership-wise, both on linear and on digital. That means that people didn't watch it when it was aired live, and people didn't watch it when you could get it on demand on digital. Its poor ratings performance is perhaps a little surprising, given that Riverdale, which it was a spinoff from, has been such a consistent performer across all platforms. Riverdale, another show I don't watch, but it's a CW show that's quite popular. Now, you know, as you can imagine, I never watched Katie Keene. I guess you could tell by my comments. But as you know, I watch the DC Universe shows on the CW. I watched Batwoman, Arrow, Flash, Black Lightning. I watched all that stuff, which I'll only confess to you guys because you listen to me. And I'll say this much, that show, Katie Keene, had to be absolutely unwatchable to its target audience if the CW bailed on it after one season. You know, from the commercials. Now, they advertise all their shows during their other shows. And so I did see Katie Keene commercials, and it looked to me to be the perfect formula show for them. And I'm sure that's why it was greenlit. I'm sure when they were presented the suits at CW with, hey, let's make this show about Katie Keene, they looked at it and they were like, this will work because people like this type of show on the CW. So it just must have been a bad show. Now, like I say, I know people worked hard on that show, and people are now out of work because it was canceled, and that the people that worked on the show, even though it turned out badly, they weren't trying to make a bad show. So I don't like criticizing artists or people who work hard, but that's still, no matter how hard you try, sometimes the show is just bad. And I think that must be the case. Now, you know, I'm not, like I said, the show was not for me. But if a teen fashion show with a queer character gets canceled on the CW after one season, there was something gravely the matter with it, because that seems like it's tailor-made for that network. Let's hope those people who lost their jobs have been picked up somewhere else. You know, they got another job, or they have something better in the works, because, like I said, I'm sure they put in long hours, and I'm sorry that happened to Katie Keene. I'm very surprised for the reasons I just said. So that's it for Katie Keene. Here is some breaking Bay blow-up news. The Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, known as SAG-AFTRA, has told its members to refuse work on the pandemic thriller Songbird, which is produced by Michael Bay. Songbird had been announced in mid-May, and I reported it on this podcast as a low-budget production that would shoot in Los Angeles. The Performers Union announced that the do not work order on Thursday for production company On the Lark Productions, LLC. Now, LLC, On the Lark Productions, LLC is the production company that's making this movie. It said that the company had failed to complete a signatory process and is therefore not signed to do any applicable SAG-AFTRA agreement. The Screen Actors Guild warned members that they could be disciplined if they worked on Songbird. Now here's a quote. As such, SAG-AFTRA members are hereby instructed to withhold any acting services or perform any covered work for this production until further notice from the union, SAG-AFTRA said in a statement. Here's some more. Please note, accepting employment or rendering services on Songbird may be considered a violation of Global Rule 1. Dun, dun, dun. Violating this order may result in disciplinary action in accordance with the SAG-AFTRA Constitution, end quote. Now, a SAG-AFTRA spokesperson who went unnamed in this report that actually it's a press release that I'm looking at, also said, quote, the producers have not been transparent about their safety protocols, and that is something we obviously take very seriously. Also, as noted in the do not work order, the producers have not yet become signatory to our agreement. We have no further comment, end quote. Now, according to a published report, Songbird is a near-future narrative produced by Bay and others. The story is set 2 years in the future, in which the pandemic has not gone away, as the virus continues to mutate. ICM Partners and Endeavor were teaming to sell Songbird, the finished product, or the rights to this movie at last month's virtual Cannes market. Now, the producers did not immediately respond to requests for comment for this story from The Hollywood Reporter and from Variety and from Collider, which were the sources for the information that I just reported to you. Now, I reported back in May that Michael Bay was ready to start filming in the LA area before the work restrictions, had been relaxed and they went into phase 2. And I'm sure that the Screen Actors Guild is primarily concerned. Their concerns primarily have to do with the possibility of the spread of COVID-19 on the set, even though they worry about all kinds of things like, stunt people and, all kinds of, they want to make sure that actors are not put in harm's way. That's the purpose of the union. One of the purposes, besides obviously negotiation of contracts and all that type of thing. They want to make sure that people are not put in dangerous situations that will affect their career or the rest of their lives. I mean, to go back to the Ruby Rose story, I mean, she hurt her back on the Batwoman set. Now, she said that's not the reason why she's leaving, but I have to believe, or she left, but I have to believe that might have been one of the reasons. Besides the long work hours, she didn't want to be crippled because she had to put on the cowl and the cape. She just didn't think it was worth it, I think. And anyway, they want to make sure that people don't go on sets about a pandemic during a real pandemic and catch COVID-19. Now, this film was and is expected to be released as a streaming movie. But as I mentioned, I wondered how many people would want to watch a movie about an unending pandemic in the midst of a pandemic that's on its back end. That was when the movie was originally announced in May, when we thought we might be at the end of this thing going into the fall or the end of the summer. Now, with the current resurgence of coronavirus in the U.S., I wonder how wise it is to make a movie about the subject matter at all and expect to turn a profit. I don't know how many people are going to find a movie like that enjoyable to watch. I don't know. Michael Bay has certainly made a fortune in the movie business. And I guess he knows what he's doing. He knows that he's doing more than I do. So stay tuned. I will let you know how this goes. But I thought it was very interesting that the Screen Actors Guild kind of threw down the gauntlet and said, if anyone works on this movie, we're going to take disciplinary action against you until Michael Bay puts his name and the production company on the dotted line, which I think is a good move for their union. And finally, here is some breaking news from Delos. Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy have set their sights on creating another expansive sci-fi series. The Westworld duo are developing a new show at Amazon based on the Fallout video game franchise. Their Kilter Films banner is producing the project, which has a series commitment penalty attached, meaning it would go directly to series if Amazon execs on board with the scripts. The Fallout series, which began in 1997 with the original game, is set in a world where the future envisioned by Americans in the late 1940s explodes upon itself through a nuclear war in 2077. With their Amazon project, Nolan and Joy will look to bring, quote, the harshness of the wasteland set against the previous generation's utopian idea of a better world through nuclear energy, end quote, to the small screen. The project will look to retain the game's harsh tones while making sure it is still sprinkled with moments of ironic humor and B-movie nuclear fantasies, which players of the epic franchise will know and love. And here is a quote, Fallout is one of the greatest game series of all time. It's a big claim. Each chapter of this insanely imaginative story has cost us countless hours we could have spent with family and friends. Boy, they were hooked. So we're incredibly excited to partner with Todd Howard and the rest of the brilliant lunatics at Bethesda to bring this massive, subversive, and darkly funny universe to life at Amazon Studios, said Joy and Nolan in a joint statement. End quote. Well, I do know that I'm not a gamer, which those of you who listen to me probably is obvious. But I know that Nolan and Joy are, and they brought several of those elements into Westworld in building that universe. And as you all know, if you listen to me, I'm a big fan of that show. We did a recap of last season on this show. And I plan on doing it again if it comes back. And I hope it does. I'm extremely excited that Nolan and Joy are doing another series because I think as much as I like Westworld, they've kind of come to the end of the road. I hope for a new series. I mean, a new season. But they've kind of milked that one pretty dry. And so we'll see where it goes. It's good to see they have some new stuff to chew on. I look forward to their visuals and their storytelling. I think they're brilliant television filmmakers and look forward to the series. So next, guess what, folks? I'm going to talk about movies that are delayed, the studios are delaying, and how that's going to affect us in our streaming future. Yes, I'm going to talk about that once again. So go get a good stiff drink. Go get some refreshments. I'm going to go get. All right. Movies. This is going to sound like a repeat to some of y'all. I'm back, and what I'm going to talk about now is about what I've been talking about probably for the last month, and that's these movies, studio movies, films that were supposed to be shown in the theater that have been pushed back, and I think have a good chance of going to streaming. There's a reporter named Rebecca Rubin who wrote an article. I'll read the title of the article. Studios Keep Delaying Movies. What is the Cost? By Rebecca Rubin. And it's out of Variety. Surprise, surprise, from those of you who know me. And I'm going to read some of this article, actually a lot of it, because Rebecca fills in some of the holes that I've had. And I've talked about the cost of marketing and the cost of what it's going to take to push these movies back. But I didn't have hard numbers to assign to those marketing costs, and Rebecca does. So I thought that I would share her article, or part of her article, with you. So here it is. Over the past few months, it's become something of a predictable game. Studios announce plans to release a new film in theaters. The pandemic upends those plans, and the studio delays the movie again. Rinse, wash, repeat. We've seen this play out with high-profile movies like Christopher Nolan's Tenet, which has moved twice in the last month, and Disney's Mulan, which has been postponed 3 times since March. There's a good chance that the trend continues if coronavirus cases keep rising across the country and states force theaters to remain shuttered. In a pre-coronavirus world, it would have been impossible for premiere dates to be this fluid. But when cinemas first started to close in March due to coronavirus pandemic, studios began shifting movies en masse into the back half of the year or into 2021 and beyond. Tenet, Mulan, and other movies, hoping to be among the first to greet moviegoers when cinemas reopen, for now have some flexibility since release calendars are wide open. However, if movies that have already been moved multiple times keep shuffling around, studios eventually run the risk of burning through marketing dollars. Now, this is why I'm reviewing this article, to reiterate. Because I've spoken about the marketing piece of this puzzle before, and I didn't have numbers. And Ms. Rubin's reporting is going to help us here. So here's a quote. Everyone is playing a waiting game, said Eric Handler, an analyst with MKM Partners. Quote, with blockbuster films, the budgets are substantial. To recoup these budgets, they need theaters. But there's no visibility of when they're going to reopen. So it's sort of a chicken and egg situation, end quote. Should Tenet and Mulan be able to hold on to their latest scheduled debuts, and that's August 12th and August 21st, respectively, which I think is a virtual impossibility at this point, but I've said that several times in this podcast, executives and analysts say there won't be much of an economic loss. So if they release them when they say they're going to release them, it'll be okay. However, marketing funds might be stretched thinner to accommodate for extra weeks here and there. But all in all, they won't be strained. But that equation changes if the delays keep coming. At some point, studios will have to decide between extending marketing campaigns for longer than expected or stopping and restarting them when it gets closer to the release date. What she didn't put in there is that I think they're going to have to consider maybe streaming or doing a hybrid streaming thing. The article continues. Film executives privately estimate that pushing Mulan or Tenet a few weeks at a time could amount to losing $200,000 to $400,000 in marketing fees. Now, those are essentially negligible costs for a major studio in the grand scheme of things when you're unveiling a new movie. A few weeks back when I made a comment on this podcast about Justice League turning a profit of a couple of $100 million and the theaters and the studios being disappointed with that. I got several emails from people telling me, well, you didn't include the marketing budget also, which probably made them go into the red instead of just box office minus the cost of the production of the movie, which is true. I didn't do that. So marketing dollars are very important. Depending on various factors, back to the article, depending on various factors, that number could increase to be just under $5 million if they are delayed again without sufficient notice. There you go. There's the big number. That's because the bulk of a film's promotional and advertising efforts run in the 2 weeks prior to its release. So far, the release date changes have fallen outside of that window. But I guess what they're saying is that if it's a last-minute change and they've already started marketing, then they're going to lose all that money. Marketing a tentpole movie, which often carries production budgets between $100 to $200 million, as we've talked about on this podcast before, is an expensive proposition in any climate. It includes everything from 30-second TV commercials and billboards to splashy star-studded premieres that routinely shut down Hollywood Boulevard. Studios begin executing those endeavors around 6 weeks before a movie is set to release. And that can be sometimes earlier during a competitive time of year like the summer movie-going season, which we're in right now. But that was then. Since multiplexes are closed and most in-person plans are still paused, studios have pivoted from traditional methods like playing trailers in theaters or organizing press tours with casts. Live events such as the NBA championships or MLB regular season games are among the most reliable ways to ensure eyeballs on the latest movie advertisements. And that is very true. Usually during the NBA finals, they'll have that Jimmy Kimmel live segment before the game. And those are always packed with whatever blockbuster movie is going to be coming soon. And I remember, because my Washington Nationals were in the World Series last year, they even had a Tenet commercial during the World Series. Because it was, it was a very short commercial, but it was going to be coming soon. And so that's a prime place for them to run, for movies, studios to run marketing. Back to the article. But with most sports on hold for now, that option isn't available either. Here's a quote. It makes it impossible to build marketing plans, Lightshed analyst Richard Greenfield said. Why even bother securing ad time if the NBA or MLB gets delayed, end quote. Despite the deviation in strategy, marketing budgets aren't getting smaller. They're just recalibrating. There's been a greater emphasis on digital media to target audiences at home, such as TikTok trends and releasing new trailers on Fortnite. At least one benefit of this bizarre time where everyone is stuck indoors is that addicting apps and popular video games are attracting more attention than ever before. I have to say, I, for one, have been guilty of getting sucked down the vortex of the black hole of TikTok. I mean, I can just keep flipping that thing sometimes, and I look up and like 30 minutes have gone by, and I've just lost in my life watching people do the Savage dance or lip sync to Kevin Hart. Yeah, I know it's sad. Here's another quote. Quote, "You're seeing studios try something different. The new trailer for Tenet launched on Fortnite," Handler said. "There's concern about how soon older adults will come back to theaters, so you have to market heavily to millennials," end quote. Because old people like me take their life in their hands if they go to the theater. Since Tenet wasn't initially scheduled to hit theaters until July, Warner Brothers only recently began committing major marketing resources. With or without a pandemic, the film has the added challenge of being original IP. Marketers have to work in overdrive to not just introduce, but hook audiences on the cerebral thriller that's set in the world of international espionage. See, that's less of a concern for Mulan. See, Mulan's a live-action adaptation of a Disney classic animated tale. So most moviegoers, especially those who would go see Mulan, they're familiar with the fearless Chinese warrior tale. But Mulan has to worry about more than just northern invaders, since its theatrical release was scrapped 2 weeks before its targeted U.S. launch. Disney already shelled out about $500,000 for its glitzy L.A. premiere in March, one of the last Hollywood events before everything shut down because of public health concerns. It's not just studios with money on the table. Theaters can't successfully reopen until there's a new product to show on the big screen. Date postponements, along with rising virus levels, are causing exhibitors to amend their plans as well. AMC, the biggest theater chain in the country, pushed back its plans to resume business by 2 weeks. The exhibitor and its rival circuits now plans to resume business at the end of July in hopes of being fully operational by August. Here's a quote. "We are in a big holding pattern right now," Handler said. "The industry is at the mercy of the municipalities of the biggest U.S. markets. The problem is, in a number of markets, there are rising levels of COVID-19 cases. It's causing municipalities to pump the brakes. Hopefully in these markets we will see things level off, and that will give the government a little bit of comfort. It's going to take time," end quote. Now there's a saying that says, uncertainty is the only certainty. And that's doubly true in a pandemic. Even if theaters are able to reopen in the coming weeks, something that looks increasingly unlikely as each day passes is that there's no telling if people are going to show. Here's a quote, and it's the very thing I've been saying on this podcast. Quote, "Who wants to go first and light $200 million on fire? You take a massive write-down if the movie makes only a few million. That's the risk," Greenfield said. "It's a race where winning is losing. Winning has a far greater risk of losing than ever before," end quote. And that's the end of Rebecca Rubin's article that she wrote on Variety. I thought it was very good, especially since she was able to give us some numbers, at least give me some numbers that I wasn't sure what they were for the marketing budgets. And also point out the fact that if it depends when they start these marketing campaigns. And if they start 2 weeks out and then next thing you know, the city shuts down and they have to push the movie back some more, that's marketing dollars down the drain. And so I think that one of the big legacies of this pandemic is the wholesale paradigm shift on the manner in which movies are consumed, meaning there's going to be more digital streaming of first-run movies. Also, because of that, there's going to be a change in the way that they are marketed. The budgets are going to be smaller, so therefore they're going to have to use marketing like social media, which I'm hoping will still be free-ish going forward, and TikTok, which is social media, but Fortnite, also YouTube. All of these things are going to be where studios invest their money rather than television commercials as much. And also going further, it's going to affect how movies are made, meaning they're going to have smaller budgets. They're going to be very hesitant to spend the $200 million. See, since I'll point to, not that I'm a movie historian, but I'm just going to I'll point to Jaws. Since movies like Jaws came out, and then Star Wars, and then the Indiana Jones movies, et cetera, if a studio really thought there was a really good chance because of the formula that they have and the quality of filmmaking that they have, that they will get their money back, especially with the ticket prices that moviegoers are willing to pay, then they would invest in a movie like Mulan because they know they're going to get their money back. However, that's not going to be necessarily the case if the movie can't go to the movie theater. So these budgets are going to be just, on average, smaller. That's just the way business works. They're not going to take that risk anymore as often. So the budgets will get smaller, and the special effects now, because you're not going to be necessarily on a big screen, you're not necessarily going to have to go in the IMAX Dolby Sound situation, they're going to make the special effects so they look good on smaller screens and that the sound sounds good on home entertainment systems. I think that's going to be the state-of-the-art movie that we're going to see. We're not going to, in some cases, especially for the movies that are under $50 million. So That's why I put this article, and I've talked about this on the television podcast, because I think all of these things that are affecting Hollywood, all these things that are affecting the movie theater venue, are all going to come back to the small screen. And soon, this TV podcast is going to be the first run movie podcast, because I think that's the way this is going to go. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if things get really bad. Hopefully they don't. I am not hoping for this. But if for some reason these numbers continue to go up and people are hesitant to go back to the theaters, even if the numbers go down and people are hesitant to go back to the theaters, I won't be surprised if maybe a movie like Furious 9 or maybe Tenet, if things get too stretched out too long, maybe even Wonder Woman, they go on to video on demand at a higher price or something, so they can get their money back and they can release the movie. There'll still be interest in those movies, but they have to find a way that they can stream them and they can still get their money back if they're not able to go into the theaters. They may do both. A high video on demand price, and also you can go to the movie theaters and take your life into your hands. The choice is yours. Next, I'm going to give you some more breaking news, and then we will finish up with the finale of Hightown. Thank goodness. Don't go away. We're going to pay some bills. Be back in 60 seconds. See you then. Ready? Hey. You like Tom Cruise? He's all right. I am back, and I do have some breaking news I told you I'd bring you. And some just came over the wire. This is breaking UK news. The UK government is ready to exempt some leading US actors, such as Tom Cruise, and crew from its 14-day travel quarantine to allow Hollywood blockbusters to resume production. The move follows a conversation between Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden and Cruise earlier this week about restarting filming on the latest Mission Impossible movie. The exemption will allow Mission Impossible 7, starring and produced by Cruise, to restart filming at Warner Brothers Studios near London. Dowden said, and here's the quote, quote, "The world's biggest blockbusters and high-end TV shows are made in Britain. Our creativity, expertise, and highly successful tax reliefs for our screen industries means that we are an in-demand location that in turn delivers a great return for our economy. We want the industry to bounce back, and exempting small numbers of essential cast and crew from quarantine is part of our continued commitment to getting cameras rolling safely again," end quote. The government said that the exemption only applies to cast and crew coming to England, and other parts of the UK have their own rules. Employed on film and television productions that qualify as British according to British Film Institution classification. So, I guess that means you have to, the whole thing, whatever qualifies as British. You know, I don't know if you like do a segment of a particular show, like if Curb Your Enthusiasm had a London segment, I guess that wouldn't qualify. Those who are exempted have to live and work in a protected bubble environment for 2 weeks. Adrian Wooten, chief executive of the British Film Commission, said, quote, "Today's immensely welcome news is also a clear recognition of the importance of the film and high-end TV inward investment sector to the UK's economy," end quote. He also said, quote, "The sector was worth over $3.75 billion, with a B, in 2019, and has a clear role to play in our economic recovery following the lockdown," end quote. Ben Roberts, chief executive of the British Film Institute, said, quote, "Film and television are worth $12.4 billion. A lot of these numbers are large to the UK economy, and being able to get production back up and running as quickly as possible is going to help our industry and its 77,000 production workers to contribute to the UK economic recovery." So that, those numbers are a lot different. He says, one guy says the sector is worth $3.75 million, and the other guy says it's worth maybe film and television combined are worth $12.4 billion. It's a lot of money, so I guess they want us to come over there to Britain. Unless you're not associated with the film industry, then you need to stay your butt in the United States of America with your coronavirus. Here is some old news. I have no sound effect for old news, so this is some old news. This is a list of films that were released for the July 4th weekend. This podcast is going to drop the Tuesday after that weekend, so that's why it's old news. But, you know, some of these movies you knew came out because there was a lot of fanfare. Some of them you may have watched already. Others you probably have not or may not have heard of, and that's why I'm sharing it with you, because that's what we do here on the TV podcast. Well, I guess the number one movie that was released this weekend is exclusive to Disney Plus, and that is Hamilton. Now, Hamilton was directed by Thomas Kail. He directed the stage play, and he also directed the taping of the stage play that Disney Plus is using for its production. And here's a little blurb. Overseen by David Kail, who also directed the show on Broadway, this direct stage-to-screen version of Hamilton isn't a filmed adaptation, but a live capture, a dynamic record of the musical as it appeared in New York, featuring the original cast. Covered over multiple performances by 6 cameras, the 2.5-hour feature is edited like the world's longest Super Bowl halftime spectacular, whatever that means, which differentiates it from those stuffy theatrical productions aired on PBS. Now, come on now. You don't have to go down on PBS like that. Some of those are pretty good. As if everything else about it weren't entirely unique already. Okay, that was written by a gentleman named Peter DeBruge. And I'm sure Peter's a fine writer, but damn, you don't have to like slam PBS like that. You know what I mean? Here are some independent films that dropped on demand this past weekend, and I'll tell you where you can find them and a little bit about the film if I have that information. The first one is a movie called The Outpost, directed by Rod Lurie. Where you can find it, it's on Amazon Prime. Also, it's on video on demand on some cable services. Here's a little bit about it. Such a film may suffer from home viewing. Yet, The Outpost represents the most exhilarating new movie audiences have been offered since the shutdown began, which softens the compromise of watching it under less than ideal conditions. Although it seems frivolous to talk about poor conditions compared to what the servicemen of Bravo Troop 3rd Squadron, 61st Cavalry Regiment faced at COP Keating. I guess that's what the show is. Those are the people at the outpost. The film makes clear in its opening moments how tense life in such a camp must be at all times, as bullets blaze down from above, cutting fiery streaks across the screen. Well, I think this is going to be a good example. I know I'm sounding like a broken record here. But if The Outpost does well, especially on demand, I mean, I know a lot of people have Amazon Prime. I have Amazon Prime, so I won't be paying extra. But they'll see the numbers of the people that choose to watch it. And if they track those numbers and enough people watch The Outpost on video on demand and on Amazon Prime, movies like this might be made in the future with a smaller budget. Because I'm sure this does look probably great on a big screen, since by this description, it sounds like it was. But you can make a film or film a production or tape a production digitally that will look really good on television, and it won't be as expensive as on the big screen. And I think movies like The Outpost in the future are going to be made that way in case it has to go to the little screen. Here's another movie called Black Magic for White Boys. It's directed by Onar Turkel, and you can also find this on Amazon Prime or video on demand. This ensemble comedy with a silly supernatural angle centered on a decrepit off-Broadway theater won't make its marker belated breakthrough. But those who grok is a word I love, it means empathize, with his misanthropic, offhand brand of humor, it will compromise other satisfying, idiosyncratic chapters in a singular career that carries forward a trail previously blazed by the likes of Woody Allen and Mel Brooks. Whoever wrote this, dude, I mean, bravo for your use of vocabulary you don't hear all the time. Grok is probably the only thing that's on here that people don't hear at all. But you're not George Will, okay? You're just writing a movie blurb. That's all I got to say about that. Next is Force of Nature. It's directed by Michael Polish. You can also find that on Amazon Prime or video on demand services. Here's the blurb. This diverting thriller from director Michael Polish has Emil Hirsch as a cop protecting various apartment building residents, including Kate Bosworth and Mel Gibson, from a murderous gang of thieves. I don't think you have to protect Mel Gibson. Yet, more complicating factors, from wild animals to Nazi war booty, get thrown into the hectic hopper of Corey Miller's first produced feature screenplay. None of this is particularly credible, I'm sure, let alone memorable, but it's all executed with sufficient energy and humor to make for an enjoyable night's entertainment. Now, this is one that probably would have gone to direct to video on demand, regardless of any type of pandemic or natural disaster. Next one is John Lewis, Good Trouble. You can find this on Amazon Prime. I plan on watching this. This is a documentary. Here's a little bit about it. Currently serving his 17th term as a member of Congress, the 80-year-old U.S. representative has always been at the forefront of the struggle for racial justice. From being one of the original 1960 freedom riders who protested against transportation segregation to fighting against the suppression of black voters since the early 60s. So the timing couldn't be more ideal for Dawn Porter's John Lewis, Good Trouble, a detailed yet paint-by-number study of the living legend who believes in the necessity of making good trouble as an instigator of social change. John Lewis is one of the last remaining leaders in the civil rights movement, not those who participated in it, but certainly on the forefront of it, who also happened to go from being an activist to actually working for the government. I think he's a very interesting individual, so I'm going to watch that. Here's another one, Street Survivors, the true story of the Leonard Skinner plane crash. It's also on Amazon, and you can find it on some video on demand services. The film delivers on the promise or threat of its title being a big, vivid way with enough drawn-out suspense once engines start backfiring and enough grisly carnage on the ground to give most viewers at least a second thought about flying again soon, at least on a prop engine plane, especially one with musicians on board. Despite its probably modest budget, Street Survivors is actually first-class as a convincingly harrowing aeronautical disaster movie if you're a follower of the genre that has Peter Weir's 1993 Fearless to live up to. Now, when I first saw the title of this movie and heard it was coming out, I was hoping it was a documentary, but it is not. This is a docudrama. I guess they're going to portray what they imagine happened on board, and it's also listed as a musical. So I'm not a fan of Leonard Skinner. If you're a fan of Leonard Skinner, probably a great movie for you to watch, or at least an entertaining movie for you to watch. For someone like myself, I would have rather had a documentary on this, but this reviewer seems to like it. So if you like Leonard Skinner, check it out. Here's another one about music, but this is a documentary, Susie Q. This is on video on demand services. The documentary is almost as charming as its subject, who is seen in bookending scenes putting the leather back on for some raucous rock shows in the lead up to her recent 70th birthday. It does suffer a bit, though, from being in that precocious position of needing to satisfy the curiosity of her fans of 50 years while also repeatedly reinforcing for a younger viewing audience that's never heard of her how important she was. Well, I have to confess, I don't know a lot about Susie Q, so even though I am not young, you'd have to reinforce for me also how important she was. I assume that I will be familiar with some of her tunes, but I'm also confident it will be more interesting to me than it will be to my 20-year-old niece. And here are two more. One is on Netflix, this one, David Foster, Off the Record, another documentary. The movie is okay, directed by Barry Average. It's a once-over lightly portrait that teeters between offering a fascinating close-up look on how the sausage of pop gets made and being kind of an infomercial. Since the music of David Foster is all about connecting with a mass audience, swelling those numbers by swelling your heart, he's won 16 Grammys, been nominated for 47, and has sold 500 million records worldwide, A movie that presents him as an icon of success isn't totally off base, but it's still most valuable for telling us stories of how he does what he does. For those of you who don't know, David Foster's a producer, and he produced people like Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, Kenny Loggins, Jennifer Lopez, etc., Donna Summer, and that's how he sold all those records I just mentioned. So it might be kind of interesting if you like music and you like those artists. And finally, here's one that's on HBO that dropped this weekend, Welcome to Chechnya. This vital, pulse-quickening new documentary from journalist turned filmmaker David France urgently lifts the lid on one of the most horrifying humanitarian crises of our present times, the state-sanctioned purge of LGBTQ people from the southern Russian Republic. Closely charting multiple missions to extract and protect brutalized victims of the regime, France collects the most candid first-person perspectives that have proven difficult to come by in this climate of terror, thanks in large part to face-altering technology that keeps their identities hidden, but not their searing truth. So that one sounds gruesome, but it's good investigative reporting, which I totally admire, and I will definitely watch that. Plus, I like HBO. So if you heard anything on that list that you like and you didn't know was out, go check it out. There's plenty to stream. No reason why you shouldn't be in front of your set if you're a TV lover or watcher. There's some good stuff out there. Next, I'm going to bring you my review of Marcella Season 3 on Netflix. This is a wacky one, folks, but I like the show. So go get a really good drink or your edibles or your very carbonated water or your highly caffeinated tea or coffee or whatever it is you do. And I'll be back in about 30 seconds. Stay with me. See you later. All right. Have you ever seen it, Jack? Did you like it? Man, it's a crazy one. Hi, I am back, and listen, this segment, I'm going to confess, it's one that I had to put together sort of at the last minute because I expected Hightown to be on, and that's my fault. Stars decided not to air Hightown this past weekend because I guess they thought everyone would be out enjoying fireworks and catching COVID. So instead, I binged Marcella. And Marcella is a series that is a British series that's come on Netflix. And I sat down with my partner, Joan, and we actually ended up binging the whole thing in 2 days. But it was a lot. So for those of you who haven't watched it, let me tell you a little bit about it. Marcella is a British series that premiered in 2016. I'm going to tell you the basic premise of the series. I'm going to try to keep spoilers at a minimum. However, there are going to be some. So if you'd rather not hear them at all, please subscribe to the podcast. Thank you for listening this week. And I will see you again on Friday with another great show. But for those of you who want to stay and listen about Marcella, which I would highly recommend, here is what it's about. Marcella Backlund, who is played by the great actress Anna Friel, is a former London Metropolitan Police Service detective. And she decides to return to work after her husband of 15 years, Jason, who is played by Nicholas Pinnock, a good actor, abruptly announces that he's leaving her. Now, Marcella has serious mental and emotional problems. Really bad. And they're highlighted and explained in season 1. I'm not going to go into that backstory. I'm going to try to keep spoilers at a minimum, but I'll tell you a little bit about those problems, but I think they're pretty extreme. All right, I'm not going to tell you a lot about season 2, but I need to tell you about how it ended. Because by the time we get to the end of season 2, Marcella wants to kill herself by throwing herself off a building. But her colleague, Rob, actually it's her partner, another detective named Rob, manages to stop her. She, quote unquote, thanks him by attacking him and storms off. Next, we see her in a bathroom, looks like a bathroom it's a public bathroom of some sort. And she's cutting her hair off with these pair of just regular old paper scissors. They're certainly not shears. And then she takes the edge of one of the blades of the scissors and cuts her mouth open, kind of like Joker style. And, obviously she's a little unhinged And as you can hear or, tell by this description, the show is pretty intense. But the very final scene of Marcella season 2, we see her 9 days later, as they tell us, and she's living under a bridge. And she has this green parka that she's been wearing in this season, and she's still wearing it. And she still has this ridiculously brutal scar on the side of her face where she's basically cut her face open. And she's confronted by a man who offers her a job, and he'll create a new life for her. So, since she cut off her hair and cut up her face to physically kill off the old Marcella, this is exactly what she wants to do. She doesn't just want to disappear herself, but her whole life. So essentially, she has killed herself without actually taking her own life. And now you're ready to hear about season 3. Now, honestly, I wasn't crazy about season 3 from the beginning. After 2 seasons of the series, you get to know a lot of characters. And it'd been a while since I watched it, so even then I was a little fuzzy. It feels as though you're almost watching a spin-off show. Now, the original show was based in London, but now the story has moved primarily to Belfast, okay, in Ireland, obviously. And Marcella is still the lead character, and Rav, her detective partner friend back in London, he plays a key role in the season, but so there are a few familiar faces, but this is essentially a whole new show. That's basically what I say. I think it's almost possible to watch season 3 and sort of all you need to know is that Marcella has mental problems and she blacks out. Other than that, you're going to be pretty good. But I would recommend watching the first 2 seasons because they're good. I think in hindsight, I like them better than season 3, although I did enjoy this. Like I said, we binged it in 2 days. Now, Marcella herself is called Kira, and we soon find out, or come to find out, that she's working undercover in a mob-like family in Belfast. They're the Maguire family, and they run everything there in Belfast. And Marcella is deep undercover. And she actually becomes almost part of this mob family in Belfast. They all know that she used to be a police officer. That's part of her backstory. And they're under the impression that she's always been Kira. They don't know anything about her Marcella identity. And she has the backstory that she was thrown off the force for being a bad egg. And I don't recall them ever going into detail about what exactly she did. They might have. And, I was, distracted by something else maybe when they went over that. But anyway, the fact that she is a police officer or used to be a police officer is part of her backstory. And so when she goes to use some of her police skills, it doesn't throw up any red flags. In fact, they take advantage of it as a crime family. The matriarch of the Maguires is wonderfully played by an actress who was in the series Silent Witness, Amanda Burton. And Amanda Burton's character, the matriarch, Kathleen, she is not a fan of this new woman in their life. Call it female intuition, but she just does not trust this Kira person who both of her sons seem very enamored with. Once again, Rav, and he's the guy who saved Marcella from jumping off the building at the end of season 2, used to be her partner. He becomes part of this series. Now, he's a good character. He's a very interesting guy. My partner Joan is infatuated with his thick hair of jet black hair. But I'm never really a fan of coincidence bringing people together that easily. Now, this is the deal. See, it happens. He's working on this case. Remember, he's still in London. He's working on a case that's connected to the family in Belfast. And it just so happens to be the crime family that Marcella is in deep cover with. And it's his presumed dead partner. So it's a little bit too convenient. However, it works for the plot. And plus, there are so many WTF moments in this season that the fact that Rav shows up in Belfast and happens to be working this case, this murder case that's connected to this crime family that Marcella, his dead partner, is in with, is one of the smallest issues of suspending disbelief. Okay, because that's like, if you can accept everything else going on, Rav working this case is really no big deal. So Rob does get involved with the crime family of Belfast because the son-in-law in the family, named Bobby, kills the son of a high-ranking politician in a nightclub in London when he happened to be visiting London. He, as gangsters want to do, brutally beats this guy up and kills him in the nightclub. And the brothers of the family don't like Bobby as it is. He married in. He's the son-in-law. He's married to their sister. And, the son-in-law, the guy who gets married into the crime family, always is the guy who screws up. There are a lot of tropes in this thing, but it's well acted. Anyway, Marcella helps the family by using her police officer skills of the past to help keep the police off his trail. And, tells him how to give us a good alibi. And so they can't charge him with this murder, even though they know he did it. Now, an actor I don't ever remember seeing before is this guy named Martin McCann, and he does a wonderful job of portraying Bobby, who is really an idiot in most ways, the son-in-law. He's pretty, McCann does a beautiful job being like the black sheep, the family millstone, of dragging everyone down. He is much like Ben Mendelsohn's Danny Rayburn in the series Bloodline. He does an excellent job just of being a heel, and he is a heel. But anyway, so I think look out for Danny. If you watch season 3, watch Danny. You are going to love to hate him. Overall, the cast is great, but I do feel like there are too many new characters. That means that we see less of Anna Friel, who remains brilliant as Marcella, or Kiera. But it's hard to understand her motivations or behavior because we don't know her well enough. At least that's my feeling. Now, maybe I feel that way because there was so much time had passed between me watching season 1 and 2 and now watching season 3. It's just hard to understand her motivations, but perhaps that's the point. Season 3 of Marcella has 8 episodes. And they're now all out on Netflix, as Netflix does. So you might need a few episodes to get into the new scenery and the new cast if you are a veteran of the show. But by episode 2, you should be good to go. And again, kudos to Friel and Burton, the 2 lead women of the cast. There's something about their performances that had me hooked. If I have to give a recommendation, I say it's worth watching for those 2 actresses. They do a very good job. Now, if you watch the first 2 seasons of the series, then you obviously need to watch the 3rd season. It's a whole new ballgame in many ways, but somehow Friel and the writers have left just enough of the original Marcella character and the persona of Kiera to make it work. But it's in a very disorienting way. See, much of season 3 is centered on the battle for control between Marcella, her once stable, in quotes, and family-focused past self, and the impulsive, relentless Kiera, that's her assumed identity, that has somehow become dominant. She has bought in so deeply onto her cover identity that she's almost schizophrenic. She almost has two personalities. I don't know. Anyway, however, that's not the only struggle that's in her head, the 2 personalities. She also believes that someone is stalking her while on her undercover missions. She hears music from the lullabies she used to sing to her child, and the newspaper clippings of her old cases start emerging. So she continues to go through these blackouts that come on when she has these episodes. Now, Marcella is used to blackouts because she's been doing it for so long. There's an interesting wrinkle, though, when it comes to her life as Kiera. As Marcella, those blackouts would be reserved for violent outbursts. Like in the first 2 seasons, when she got upset, she would black out and then, wake up somewhere else. But now that her violent, secretive nature has not fully taken control, Kiera's blackouts serve as a way for her to get back to her old self. Yeah, it makes even less sense when I hear myself say it out loud. Oh man, but it's all a bit complicated. But I'm going to say it's worth the watch, and I probably will have to watch it again because I'm sure that I have misinterpreted something. And those of you who have seen the season and I'm just totally lost and explaining it incorrectly, feel free to email me at podcasthoward gmail.com. I will love the correction. Trust me. I'm giving Marcella season 3 on my 5-tier food rating system 4 out of 5 summer cookout burgers grilled to perfection. It's good. It's not perfect, but it's good. Now, the secret to watching this thing is not to think. Just don't think and keep going to the next episode. Don't think, go to the next episode, and you will thank me for it. And that's it. Listen, I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC Television Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review for us. That really helps us. We're trying to grow, and that will help us grow. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that would be good too. Please remember to email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com with any requests for shows or programs for me to cover, and also for your feedback. I will read all emails on the show. I look forward to it. Please write me. Now listen, I know we're in some strange times, some challenging times right now, but we can all pull through this together if we work together. We're still in a worldwide pandemic. Certain aspects of it are getting better, but infections are getting worse. So please remember to wash your hands often. Limit your up-close and personal interaction with people if you can, just for now. And always wear a mask when you go out of the house, especially if you're going to be in close quarters, and especially if you're going to be inside. I want you to have a safe and productive week. And until we meet again, please stream with care. Jack and I love you guys. Be kind to one another. And whatever you do, if you decide to take an undercover detective assignment anywhere, but especially in Belfast, do your best to remember who you are. My name's Howard Fletcher. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.